Sharon Angle, as I mentioned before, this challenger to the Senate Democrat Harry Reid, has got a good chance of beating him, which is why the established media is out in force saying that she's a right-wing extremist just because she supports people upholding their oath to the Constitution and wants to get the deadly neurotoxin sodium fluoride out of the water. So with people like that really having a chance of wrestling back some of the power from the establishment in Washington, D.C., they need some kind of event which they can exploit to demonize their political opposition. And when you've got people like Rahm Emanuel being the chief string puller for Obama, who is a complete puppet and merely reads off a teleprompter, the real power in that administration is certainly with Rahm Emanuel to a point. And he's the son of an Israeli terrorist who planned the bombings of hotels and marketplaces. He was in the Irgun terrorist group that killed hundreds of people. So when you've got people like that advising Obama and, you know, never let a good crisis go to waste, and then you read in the Financial Times that this big Obama supporter, Shapiro, is saying that basically we need a terror attack, otherwise Obama's finished, then I think we should be a little bit concerned about it.
Well, you can see the preparatory brainwashing, so people think the mainstream media, boy, they're really on target. The right-wingers did blow up a federal building. Darn them, we've got to get their guns. My gosh, I also see an attempted assassination. God forbid we're totally against that happening, against Barack Obama. As a caller said last Sunday, the question is, will Obama be taken out by impeachment or embalmment? And we hope that he is not taken out by embalmment. We want Obama, a teleprompter reading CIA agent for Indonesia, to certainly live a long life. We don't want that puppet to be turned into a martyr. The same reason the globalists don't want to kill me is because they don't want to turn me into a martyr against their tyranny. We don't want the globalists to turn Obama or any of his criminal scallywags into some type of martyr as well.
No, but it would be very easy for them to do that. If you look into exactly how much of a vacuous puppet Obama is, how much of a front man he is, it's transparent to see that he's just a water carrier for the elite, and he could be replaced at any moment. You know, his speeches are written by Bilderberg members. His book was written by Bill Ayers, the domestic terrorist weather underground bomber. You know, everything he does is coordinated by somebody else standing behind the scenes. So, I mean, they could easily run a false flag against Obama.
Well, it was declassified last year that Patty Hearst, going in with machine guns provocatively and shooting it on 18-millimeter film, that was all directed by the FBI and was staged. That's now been declassified.
Yeah, so they've always got that tool. I mean, to a large extent, it's been discredited and eviscerated by the fact that it's been so voluminously and repeatedly exposed since 9/11. But what I see happening is that they'll just let Obama wither and die, and they'll get a Mitt Romney in, and then we'll really see, the fascism come into play, especially with regards to the economy. And I think they'll just play it that way, because you've still got a mass of brainwashed right-wingers who will just think that a Republican is the answer again. The Tea Party's largely being taken over by these people. There are candidates that really, on most of the issues, would come down on our side, on the constitutionalist libertarian side, people like Rand Paul and, as I mentioned before, Sharon Angle. But there's still this huge mass of people that will gleefully go to the polls in 2012 and just put Mitt Romney in, and we'll just get, George W. Bush 2 again. So, I mean, that's the avenue I see them going down. But if it really gets out of hand with this economic collapse, then who knows what's going to happen.
Good points, Paul. Let's look at a few other staged crises that they can pull off. I mean, I've got a few that I want to list here, but what are some of the other crises you see them using?
Well, obviously, you've got the cybersecurity agenda. Joe Lieberman, the sponsor of this bill, which would give Obama the power to flick a virtual kill switch to shut down the internet for at least 4 months before he had to get congressional approval. He openly unveiled the cybersecurity agenda for what it was last month in an interview with CNN's Candy Crowley, when he said, quote, "Right now, China, the government, can disconnect parts of its internet in case of war, and we need to have that here too." So he's openly saying that cybersecurity is part of a move towards the Chinese-style censorship and policing of the internet. Now, as I wrote in my article today, China's internet system has nothing whatsoever to do with, quote, war or security. It's all centered around keeping people politically oppressed and stopping them from communicating with each other and organizing politically to get active. And it's about censoring government atrocities and government cover-ups and government abuse. So Lieberman has openly said that that's what cybersecurity represents.
Well, we've got all these White House officials saying they want to censor it. We've got the FCC saying they want to control the internet. We've got them saying they want to put a tax on alternative media. That's an official proposal by the Federal Trade Commission and the FCC to tax alternative media to, quote, fund a government megaphone on TV and establishment newspapers. I mean, this is a violation of the First Amendment. It's the government involved in the, quote, free market. But briefly going back to China, look at this AP article. Beijing starts gating, locking migrant villages. And they write the article like it's a positive thing. The government calls it sealed management. China's capital has started gating and locking some of its lower-income neighborhoods overnight, with police or security checking identification papers around the clock, and a throwback to the old style of control. They already do that in New York, where they search everybody out at night. It's Beijing's latest effort to reduce rising crime, often blamed on millions of rural Chinese migrating to the cities for New York. For work. I'm thinking of New York being a police state. The capital's Communist Party secretary warns the approach promoted citywide, or wants it promoted citywide, but some state media and experts say the move not only looks bad, but imposes another layer of control on the already stigmatized vulnerable migrants. And so far, the gates have sealed off 16 villages in the sprawling southern suburbs where migrants are attached to cheaper rents, and some villages outnumber permanent residents 10 to 1.
Yeah, well, it's not surprising that the Associated Press would report that with pleasure, because, as we said before, the Chinese system is the goal. In China, even in the rich cities like Shanghai, the richest cities, you've got a two-caste system. You've got the people who've got some wealth right up against the poor. And basically there's no middle class whatsoever. The poor can live right next to the rich. You know, they basically live on the street as it is in places like Shanghai.
Well, it's admitted that CPS doesn't take the children of millions of workers that chain their children all day to telephone poles or to light poles. And there's no environmental standards. They're having to put nets all over the factories for people jumping off, committing suicide. Meanwhile, this is what we're competing with. When we buy these goods, we are basically lowering ourselves to their level instead of demanding more tariffs, so China has to raise its quality of life. It's actually a race to the bottom. Globalism, when Obama at the G20 in Toronto a few weeks ago talked about no nation can be greater than the other, he means all nations must be lowered, not raise the poor nations. Globalism is feudalism.
Yeah, that's the whole point of the green economy. It's to lower nations to lower first world nations to at least a second world status. And it's proved absolutely disastrous in Spain, where they've now got a 20% unemployment rate and 2.2 jobs are lost for every, quote, green job that's created.
Mission accomplished. And you say, we're not against them, it's just amazing to see it, that now it's not Eastern Europeans and Arabs that are flooding England, but that it's people from Spain. There's an exodus.
Yeah, every time I, travel across the UK, I see tons and tons of Spanish people, which I never saw in the past. And they're not tourists because, they've got baby strollers and they're going home on the train. they've vacated Spain in their droves because with this green economy, everything's crashing and burning, and they've got double the unemployment rate that we've got in the UK, which is bad enough as it is.
And that's what the New World Order is. The OECD and all of them state this, that they want a global government, so there's nowhere to run, and everywhere is. In fact, I saw the OECD a decade ago say France is the model with an 80+% income tax.
Yeah, as I was saying before, 80+% income tax is not something that's out of the ordinary in the past 100 years. It's only in the past few decades that most Western nations have had this, in the UK and the US, it's 40 to 50% top bracket. In the UK in 1977, the nominal rate of income tax was 98%. Everything you earned over £20,000, which would be about $30,000, everything above that, the vast majority of it went straight to the government. Now, obviously, we have to adjust for inflation in 2010, but on that scale, the middle class would cease to exist because you would never be able to earn anything above a subsistence level income bracket.